I finally added a sealed copy of LMFAO's Sorry for Party Rocking to my collection, and nothing can come between us. Hey everyone, I'm back again with another record pickup video. It's been a while since the last video, as the earliest pickup I have is from all the way of February of this year, but let's not waste any time and jump right in. The first record I picked up was Lady Dan's debut album, I Am the Prophet. I picked this up while going to a DIY show my friend was performing at. Shout out to Warren Village, go give them a follow. I was taking photos of Warren Village and got to chat with the band a little bit before the show, and everyone was extremely nice. I was unaware of Lady Dan at the time, but was really impressed by their performance. They also went apeshit during a cover of Cherry Bomb as their encore, which was out of character considering the material they played, but it made me love them even more. I bought their album I Am the Prophet at their merch booth along with this Lady Dan branded thong because if you're going to have bizarre merch, I'm going to buy it. The album is pressed on this clear vinyl and has what they call a wine spill design, which is something I haven't seen before. Lady Dan's style is very much folk, or as their Bandcamp puts it, cowboy twang, but is ultimately a mix of all sorts of genres. The best way I can describe it is think of Stranger in the Alps era Phoebe Bridgers, but more upbeat. There's a mixture of acoustic instruments such as an accordion and a pedal steel, which looks like this, and other orchestral instruments. Some of my favorites off this album were Paradox, Dogs, and I Am the Prophet. I highly recommend you check this album out and support them, they're all nice people. This next record is something I've had my eye on for a long time. This is the vinyl release of Thundercat's third studio album, Drunk. The album itself is filled with funk and jazz fusion inspired tracks with a hip hop flair. It features a wide array of artists such as Pharrell, Kendrick Lamar, Wiz Khalifa, and Kenny Loggins. Most of the album features solely Thundercat on vocals, which is nice since he's mostly credited on the production side of things on projects he's worked on. His bass playing is on full display, and after listening to this album, you can't deny that he's a master of the instrument. Lots of amazing tracks on this album such as Them Changes, Friend Zone, Tokyo, and Cap It Stupido. There's also a track on the album with him meowing on it, and I still don't know how to feel about that. This album sticks out in my collection because the album is spread across 4 10-inch records. I would have preferred fewer discs and just had 2 or 3 12-inch records to save me from having to get up as often to flip the sides, but since the album is 23 tracks, I kind of understand. All the records are packaged so nicely with multiple sleeves to protect the records. Apparently Zach Fox did the sleeve design, and I don't know why, but that seems to make sense. Each one of the records is a nice bright red, which is a pleasure to look at while it's spinning on the turntable. I've wanted to add this one to my collection since I first heard it when it came out, and I'm finally glad I was able to find it for a reasonable price. I also added Billy Joel's Glass Houses to my collection. It seems like in the last couple of videos I've been on a Billy Joel binge, but it's purely coincidental. I'm not going to pass any of his albums up if they are at the right price. Glass Houses is an underrated album in his discography. It features amazing songs such as It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, All for Lena, I Don't Want to Be Alone, and Sleeping with the Television On. Definitely excited to listen to this one more. I finally added another Prince album to my collection. This is his album Parade, which was released to accompany his movie Under the Cherry Moon, which, in my opinion, I like a teeny bit more than Purple Rain, simply because it features more dialogue with Prince, and when he's paired with Jerome Benton, it makes for some memorable moments. The album itself is one of my favorites from Prince. It serves as a soundtrack to accompany the movie. This one delves more into the psychedelic and jazzy funk-inspired sounds Prince was incorporating into Around the World in a Day than more of the 80s pop sound of Purple Rain. Some of my favorites are Another Lover Hole in Your Head, Mountains, Kiss, and Christopher Tracy's Parade. This next one is a bit of an oddball, but I'll explain it a little bit. I added the original cast recording of Urinetown the musical to my collection. For a college project back in 2019, I had to see a play for one of my final assignments. Of course, I waited until the last minute, and my only 2 options were a children's play or a local college rendition of Urinetown the musical. Of course, I chose the one about PP because I thought it'd be funny, but I unironically ended up loving the whole thing. Aside from the Bat Out of Hell musical, this is up there in terms of my favorite musical. Not only is it a satire of plays like Les Mis and the Threepenny Opera, but parodies the Broadway musical entirely. The plot revolves around the fictional taxation on urination and themes of environmentalism, capitalism, and the legal system as a whole. I'm being vague, but I feel like the title is enough to entice you to check it out. I would like to make a video on this production in the future, but we'll see. No promises. I've mentioned this previously in my video about XCX World, but to iterate again, Charlie XCX is one of my favorite artists of all time. However, coming across her albums on vinyl out in the wild is rare. I did manage to snag her Quarantine album, How I'm Feeling Now, for a reasonable price, and I'm more than excited to have it in my collection. It sounds absolutely amazing on my system. This is definitely in the top 3 in terms of my favorite albums from her. The album is filled with hyperpop and electropop bangers that explore themes of loneliness and isolation in line with how I'm pretty sure we all felt at the beginning of of the 2020 quarantine, and for only being conceived, recorded, and released within a month, the album holds up amazingly well. Some of my favorites are I Finally Understand, Detonate, Visions, and C2.0. I highly encourage you to give it a shot if you are into experimental pop. I'll admit that I've been influenced by TikTok to finally add some more rap to my collection, because I too have not felt the touch of a woman in a really long time. This is Unlocked by Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats. This is a collaboration EP that focuses on a lo-fi boom-bap hip-hop style with a heavy inclusion of samples, similar to a Wu-Tang or Madlib with Kenny's style and Denzel's powerful voice over them. I wasn't crazy about this project at first when it came out, but it's grown on me over time. My main gripe is that the songs are too short. The whole EP clocks in at 18 minutes over 8 tracks. It left me wanting more in a good way. However, none of the tracks overstay their welcome, and the album works nicer listening to it all in one go than listening to the tracks on their own. It's not a very playlistable album, if you know what I mean. Denzel Curry is one of my favorite artists at the moment. It was one of my favorite rap albums of all time, and I definitely plan on adding more of his discography to my collection. I also added Men at Work's Business as Usual to my collection. Men at Work is a new wave band from the early 80s, mostly known for their hits Who Can It Be Now, I Can See It in Your Eyes, and Down Under, which are the first 3 songs off of this album. How convenient. There isn't anything super interesting to note about this one, other than I simply didn't have it yet. There's this massive 80s pop playlist that I've been building for over 6 years, and I've slowly been trying to buy all the albums that are featured on it. Of course, Men at Work was on it, and I had to add this one to my collection. The next album is 2011's A Godlike Inferno by Ancient Wisdom. This is yet another I bought it because the cover looked cool. It had a sticker that said it was a green and purple marble split for only $6. My curiosity was piqued. From what I could gather, Ancient Wisdom is I'm not sure if neo-folk is the right way to describe them. Their sound primarily uses acoustic instruments with other electronic guitars for additional texture. Their biggest claim to fame was touring with Ghost on their first headlining tour back in 2011. The band is originally from Austin, Texas, but now resides in Cleveland, Ohio, so we got that going for us. Overall, I thought this album was alright. Not something that I would revisit often, but there were a couple tracks I really liked. The Opposition was my personal favorite. While the album isn't for me, I'm glad to have it in my collection. While an unofficial repressing, this album has been a holy grail item on my list for a really long time. This is Emily by Emily Bindiger. Not much is known about this album, and the Wikipedia page for the artist is relatively barren. From releasing this album at age 16, to being on the Great Space Coaster, to recording with Leonard Cohen, to being on the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack, and multiple songs from Dot Hack Stein, it's definitely an investigation for another day for sure. This album is an outlier in that story. It's a Christian psychedelic folk album from 1972. Emily was only 16 when she performed vocals on this album. The reason why I've been looking for this album for so long is because the music is really damn good. It's a shame that this album has been forgotten to time. The only way to listen to it is on YouTube. There aren't any live recordings of the songs off this album either. The closest thing this album has received to any amount of attention was a very brief mention in a Watch Mojo video, which is a start, but this was also 6 years ago. More people need to listen to this album, and a formal re-release would be nice. I love this whole album, but some of my favorites are Confession, Jesus Said, Song of Decision, and Ode Lace to John. Let's end this video with a very bizarre addition to my collection. It also wouldn't be a record pickup video from yours truly if I didn't buy any more Jethro Tull. This is a Taiwan pressing of their first album from 1968, This Was. I bought this while I was getting the last record and thought it was so bizarre that I couldn't pass it up. The pressing itself doesn't sound too bad in comparison to the one I've owned for years. It definitely does sound a bit muffled though. I'm not one to get too crazy with how a pressing sounds, but it sounds alright. I definitely didn't need to replace my current copy of the album, but everything from its outlandishly cropped and oversaturated cardstock cover to the foreign language on the labels, I knew I had to include it in my collection, especially in the newly formed Jethro Tull cube I have on my shelf. It will be right at home with the others. And those are all the records I've picked up over the last couple of months, or past year I should say. On the contrary to previous parts in this series, I've slowly been getting back in the record collecting. I have some friends who have recently got into collecting records, and their excitement towards the hobby helped me get back into it as well. I've been trying to pick up a record here and there with every paycheck, whether it be in person or an online impulse buy. I've also been attending a lot of concerts over the past year, which has also kept me invested in adding more music memorabilia to my collection. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and thought what I added to my collection to be interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys have added to your collection in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.